Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Harp and Guitar, People and Music. And I want to thank you once again for joining me here today for another episode of Blues History. So I'm pretty excited so far about how we've been progressing through, the development of the blues. So far, just upon a review here, we've spoken briefly about some of the early proto-blues, like work songs and field hollers. And then we've spoken also about some of the early forms of maybe more structured blues and proto-blues. Things like reels and ragtime songs, and that sort of thing. So I'm pretty excited about where we've landed so far, because now we're starting to get into sort of the mid 1920s, late 1920s, where we're starting to see a lot more and more recorded blues on 78 record. At this point now, we've pretty much moved away from those wax cylinders and those little metal cylinders that would basically have a recording on them. And now we've moved into the more familiar flat 78 record at this point. And this is where there was really a big explosion in the production of blues recordings, early jazz recordings, ragtime, hokum, and all of these sorts of what was still at this time classified as American folk music. At this point, you still had people from the South and through the eastern South and across into the West, into Texas and California, and even up as far as Illinois and Missouri, recording blues and sharing some of their blues lyrics, teaching each other techniques. And all of this now has enabled the blues to spread a lot more widely across the United States. And it was because of this that the record companies sort of saw the writing on the wall and began to capitalize on this by producing and pressing and distributing and selling greater and greater quantities of blues records. Not only from more and more artists, but they just physically started pressing more copies of some of these records that were released by some of these artists. Now, it was also right around this time that not only were we seeing big record labels and big record companies like Gannett and Bluebird and Vocalion and so on, recording more and more blues and jazz artists in their major recording studios in New York and Grafton, Wisconsin, and what have you. But we were also seeing a lot more of smaller independent record labels and recording companies popping up all through the South. Probably the most notable of mention would be H.C. Spear in, I believe, in Jackson, Mississippi. And H.C. Spear was a white man who opened up a furniture store in an African-American neighborhood there in Jackson, Mississippi. And as mentioned earlier on this channel, and I'm sure you're aware of from other blues-related channels, when people wanted to buy a phonograph player, whether it was wind-up or electric, to play their phonograph records, their 78s on, they would go to a furniture store to purchase these phonograph players, because furniture companies were the ones making these players. So, of course, naturally, if you wanted to buy records to play on your phonograph player, you would go to the furniture store. So H.C. Spear opened his furniture store in Jackson, Mississippi, as I mentioned, in an African-American part of town, because he realized that there were no furniture stores that catered to this consumer group. And he also was a fan of the blues himself, so he thought it was a good opportunity for him to have a record section in his furniture store where he could sell blues and jazz recordings and records, and as well as sheet music also. So there's a lot of examples of fellows like H.C. Spear out there. It's also worth mentioning, of course, that he did have a recording studio at the back of his furniture store where he would record artists, and he would basically do test recordings, test pressings of, for example, somebody like the blues legend and founding father and blues pioneer, Mr. Charlie Patton himself, who was advised to go and see H.C. Spear in Jackson and make a test recording. And upon Speer hearing him play, was completely flipped his lid. He recorded him right away and sent his recording on up north to one of the major record labels, and of course they signed Charlie Patton up for a recording contract right away, and they sent him some money and a train ticket down for him to come up to do some of his famous recordings through the early and mid 1930s. So at this time, there was a lot of, like I said, there was a lot of these little independent recording studios popping up all over the South. But not only that, the record companies up north kind of got wind of what was going on in the South, so they started sending field trips down. They started sending some of their recording engineers with portable recording equipment down into places like Clarksdale, Mississippi, and Leland, and Rolling Forks, and just basically relying on word of mouth and looking for some of these blues artists so that they could record them. Now, a couple of things resulted out of them doing this. As I mentioned, of course, it created the situation where they were able to press a lot more quantity of the records that they were recording and producing, because the word was getting out there, and blues as a musical genre was getting more and more popular and was spreading more and more throughout the country. Not just in the South, but now it's starting to make its way from east to west and up north as well, into the Midwest and that sort of thing, up into the Pacific Northwest as well. But it also sort of created a wider range of artists. It gave the consumer, the blues consuming public, a greater selection of artists to choose from. And as well as this, of course, then it gave them an opportunity to showcase different styles of blues. Everything from, the more traditional acoustic Mississippi Delta blues to maybe some of the hill country Piedmont style of blues, and of course Chicago blues, jump blues, boogie woogie, all of the stuff that we've talked about here so far. Now, the reason that me personally I'm really jazzed about this time period is, again, because there was a lot more records being made available, and that's where old whiskey comes in, because I've got quite a few 78s from my private collection that sort of fall into this time frame, right around the mid to late 1920s. And I'm pretty proud of a lot of the old records that I have, a lot of these old 78s, because a lot of them are pretty old and they're pretty rare. And I really took the time to make sure that when I was researching and purchasing a record like this, that I was buying something that had a little bit of, historical significance, but also was something that I just personally enjoyed. I really liked, the music. So this part of our sort of blues history, this time machine, or this timeline that we're moving along here, is really speaks to me personally, because, like I said, now I can show off a little bit of my record collection of some of the old 78s that I've picked up through the years. So going forward, I'm really jazzed about this, because now I'm actually able to record some of these records for you and showcase them. So I think starting probably next week, the very first record that I'm going to showcase actually is the oldest record that I have in my collection, and that would be this beauty right here. Now, this is a record by Frank Hutchison. Like I said, this is the oldest record that I have in my collection. It's from 1925. Side A has Worried Blues, and Side B has The Train That Carried the Girl from Town. A fantastic old blues record from a little bit more of an obscure but an amazing blues artist. Frank Hutchison was a blues guitar player. He played a guitar with a slide, but he played it flat on his lap, and he would slide the slide up and down the strings as he played. And he had a very interesting style, because he was from the hill country, so he did play in that sort of Piedmont style, but he utilized the slide with that to great effect. And even though this is a bit of an older, more of a scratchy record, I mean, let's face it, it's almost 100 years old by this point, you can still hear the talent and the passion and the way that Frank felt when he was singing this song and recording it and putting it down on the shellac platter, as we've referred to it in blues lore here. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think this is going to be a great new section of your blues history here at Harp and Guitar, where we're actually able to get our hands on some, tangible old records. And I'll be able, like I said, to record them and put them up here on the channel for you so that you can listen to them, enjoy them. And I'll have a little slideshow presentation going along with it, with maybe some pictures of the artist and so forth. So at this point, I think I'm going to wrap it up here for today, here at Harp and Guitar, People in Music. But I want to thank you once again for swinging by and joining us here today. If you haven't already, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and let us know what you think down in the comments section. And of course, subscribe here to the channel as well. So I hope everyone out there has a great day. Thanks again for swinging by Harp and Guitar, People in Music, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.